What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Now, I do know this. When I was growing up in the 1980s into the 1990s, um, there were three preeminent small forwards in the history of the NBA at that time. Now, one of them was still playing, Larry Bird, but they were called the three Bs: Larry Bird, Elgin Baylor, and Rick Barry. Now, here we are in 2023, and while Larry Bird is still respected, I get a sense that there's a lot of people that want to throw him to the back, throw him sort of like into the burning pile of outdated, um, overrated players. This obsession to just shit. It's this growing obsession for people to just want to shit on people from the past. I don't know what it is, man, but it's disgusting. Elgin Baylor, once highly revered, has become very underrated, and Rick Barry is never even mentioned. He's not even mentioned much anymore, which is strange considering that the franchise he's most closely associated with, the Warriors, have been one of the most preeminent franchises in the past decade. Um, Rick Barry, of course, when you combine his ABA and NBA career, scored over 25,000 points. I believe he averaged well over 24 points per game for his career professionally. He was one of the great free throw shooters in the history of the NBA. I believe he led and ABA. I believe he led the ABA and NBA in free throw percentage something like 5 times. And I believe the last 3 years he played in the NBA, the last 3 years he led the NBA in free throw percentage. He had that very awkward looking granny shot style free throw technique. Most people don't want to shoot it because, hey man, it looks like a girl. I mean, this is something you expect more from a WNBA player rather than an all-star. But it's shown to be effective. The man made 89 plus percent of his free throws for his career when you include both leagues, 89.3%. He was a 45.6% career shooter. Even though some people give the nod to Pete Maravich as the best shooter in the NBA in the 70s, I give it to Rick Barry. Rick Barry, one thing I noticed about the great shooters is that all of the great shooters usually are superior free throw shooters. That's usually a correlation. I'm not saying that Pete Maravich was a bad free throw shooter. He was definitely in the lower to mid 80 percentile, but usually the great shooters are 87 to 91% from the foul line for their careers. And that's where you see these types of guys, whether it's Chris Mullin, whether it's Ray Allen, whether it's whether it's Larry Bird, whether it's Kevin Durant, whether it's Steph Curry, whoever. These guys usually shoot in that percentage. Mark Price, Reggie Miller. But anyway, Rick Barry changed his style of play as he got older. When he first came into the NBA, he was a primary scorer. He would occasionally drive to the basket. More of a mid-range jump shooter. Driving to the basket, very prolific scorer when he first came into the NBA. In his second year, he led the Warriors to the NBA Finals, where they ultimately lost to the 67 76ers. He had a contract dispute, I believe, with the Warriors in 1967 and 68. I think he was trying to move over to the ABA because of money, but legally they wouldn't let him do that, so he sat out a year, and then he went to play in the ABA. I believe he won a championship with the Oakland Oaks his first year in the ABA. Then I think Oakland, I think they moved to Washington and became the Capitals. Initially, he tried to resist the move. He tried to go back. I think he either tried to go back to Oakland, or he just didn't want to play. When I say Oakland, I mean the Warriors. Or he just didn't want to play for the franchise. Legally, they said that he had to play for the team. And I'm going to have to call this person back. And, he went ahead and played for them. And then I think he then eventually went to play for the New York Nets. And one thing that happened while he was playing in the ABA, he was playing up against superior athletes in the ABA, because the ABA was a more physical league. It was a more physical league compared to the NBA at that time. You had more brothers in the ABA, let's be honest. It was a more above the rim game. So over time, playing in the ABA benefited Rick Barry. He became a better ball handler. He became a better passer. He actually got in better shape. He actually, not that he wasn't in great shape before, but he got in tremendous shape. And when he came back to the Warriors, might have been around 73 or so, he was a better player and a better all-around player. This was a Rick Barry that was beginning to transition to being something of a point forward, which is something that the NBA had never seen. And that's why I laugh and scoff when people say that LeBron was the first point forward. That's bullshit. The first point forwards were guys like Rick Barry, but I don't think they used that terminology then. Marquise Johnson for the Milwaukee Bucks. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, they won a championship in 1975, the Warriors. They upset it, a 61 Washington Bullets team that was heavily favored. The 1975 NBA Finals was the first finals that featured two black coaches, Al Attles for the Warriors and K.C. Jones, who had been an assistant with the Lakers, but at that time was a head coach. He was assistant with the Lakers under Bill Sharman. He was the head coach of the Washington Bullets. Rick Barry did something in the 70s that was very unusual. At that time, most of the great teams scored by committee. They were mimicking the Boston Celtics and the Lakers and the Knicks, because the NBA is a league that mimics. So usually on great teams, you might have had 5, 6, 7 guys in double-digit figures. But that particular team, they had one guy who was taking like 20-something shots a game, and that was Rick Barry. He was the one averaging 30 points a game. The only other guy that was, off the top of my head, that was a good scorer was a rookie, Jamal Wilkes. And I think they had somebody else on that team that would become a scorer. I just can't think of the name off the top of my head. But anyway, Rick Barry did a lot of heavy lifting. And in that finals, man, he was sensational, won finals MVP. They were never able to get back to the finals. But Rick Barry remained a solid player for several years. His last year in the NBA, 1979-1980, was the first year that the three-point line was instituted. And by that time, he was more of just a jump shooter. I can't remember his average, but he was a shell of himself by then, maybe 13 points a game. But he did have one game, if I'm not mistaken, where he hit 8 out of 14 from downtown. Now, this is the year the three-point line was implemented. Now, why is Rick Barry not talked about more? I think it's his personality and reputation. He was considered an asshole. He was not loved by teammates, opponents, obviously, coaches, fans, the media. They did not like him. He could be abrasive. He could be rude. He could be, he could be sarcastic. If you think the media don't like Kyrie Irving, they couldn't stand Rick Barry. They couldn't stand him. And the media will always win. I put it like this. It may feel good to cuss out a reporter, but eventually the media will win. They will always win when it comes to the court of public opinion. They will always win. And the athletes who they didn't particularly like, they will find a way to screw you. Now, some of this was self-inflicted by Rick Barry. He said a lot of things about players that he didn't particularly care for, that he should have kept to himself. He caused rifts between teammates, questioning teammates' skills and how hard they worked. And he was just an asshole. And this is why I think partially why he doesn't get a lot of respect that he deserves as a player. Because to me, he was the prototype of a Larry Bird by the mid-1970s. Wasn't quite as good as Larry Bird, but he was right up there. I mean, in his prime, Rick Barry would get you 30 points a game, maybe 5 rebounds, maybe 4 or 5 assists, 2 steals. He, had a tremendous jump shot, great mid-range jump shot, fadeaway jump shot, could score in the post, could score with his back to the basket. Just a great basketball player. And sometimes you have to wonder what his numbers would look like had he just stayed in the NBA. Didn't have to sit out years and miss time for this and that. But anyway, just want to do a video about Rick Barry, one of the great players in the 1970s, the greatest shooter, in my opinion, in the 1970s, not Pete Maravich. But tell me what you guys think.